Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. The Other Side lets you hear directly from the most connected players and observers across the spectrum of politics in Mississippi. From breaking news to political strategy to interviews with candidates and elected officials, we'll bring you facts, perspectives, and context that helps you cut through the noise and understand all sides of the story.
I'm Geoff Pender. I'm joined here today with my colleague, Bobby Harrison.
Hey, Geoff, how you doing?
Hey, Bobby. And we have as our guest today Senator Hob Bryan, Chairman of Public Health in the Senate, and from beautiful Amory, and has served in the Senate, I believe you just told me, 41 sessions now.
Not only did I just tell you that, it also is true.
It also is true.
You could look it up.
Sure. What some people might not know is that Hob is so mean. He once shot a man just for snoring, and I believe he killed a bear with a penknife. But
the bear had it coming.
Yeah.
Snoring.
Anyway.
The snoring was probably a bit much, but that bear.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for joining us today, and probably among several other things, I think we thought we might talk taxes with you a little bit, since as we've seen here lately, there's another big push afoot to essentially eliminate the income tax and maybe do some other things and cut grocery taxes.
Speaker Jason White's the person talking about that the most.
Sure.
Yeah.
And anyway, wanted to get your take on some of that plan. Are you on board with it?
Did you think my comment about Uber was clever, or did you think it was just sort of eye-rolling?
No, it was great.
So Brian, but that wasn't in the pod. That hadn't recorded. That wasn't in the podcast.
I just said, that, most people are using Uber instead of taxis these days.
Right.
But not me. I use taxis.
Well, what do you think about this plan to eliminate the income tax? I'm guessing you might have an opinion on that.
It's just a very bad idea for a number of different reasons. First of all, the state does not have that amount of excess revenue. We need money for roads. Our roads are terribly unfunded. There's no funding mechanism for roads. We have on the books a previous cut of the income tax, which is still being phased in. We're going to reduce the revenue by $100 million next year, and then an additional $150 million in the following year. So the next 2 years, we've got built-in tax cuts of $250 million, and, $250 million here, $250 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Just not to get too far in the weeds, but I also think still being phased in is a tax cut before that tax cut on that for businesses.
The
franchise
tax.
Yeah.
And so we've got these tax cuts that are being phased in. And I should say, every time they talk about the tax cut, they always talk about it in current dollars and never take into effect the cost of inflation. And we've got a $7 billion general fund without looking at the other funds. We've got just $7 billion general fund. Even at 3% inflation, that's more than $200 million a year that you would need in additional revenue every year just to keep up with the relatively modest amount of inflation. You look at things like teacher pay raise. Remember several years ago that big falderall about the $5,000 teacher pay raise? Well, what happens with teacher pay raises is we go forever without having a teacher pay raise. So we've pretty much, by the time we have another pay raise, inflation will have eaten up that $5 million. We have huge problems. We need to send money to the retirement system, and I have an idea about how to do that. And the retirement system is another big problem. I'll just say right now, I've got it on my mind. Every single person who's a state employee of city, local government, is a member of the retirement system, everybody who is a retiree needs to be eternally vigilant. They tried to cut the the benefits last year. They didn't do it because they got caught. And the reason they didn't get away with it is a huge uproar and outcry from retirees and current employees, and they don't need to go to sleep. The minute they can get away with it, they will, because there are people in the legislature that just fundamentally don't believe in the retirement system.
So what?
But back to taxes.
Well, I mean, and it's all related, but and I should say just as to explain your bona fide, Senator Bryan was at one point chair of the Tax Right and Finance Committee.
Certainly was.
But few people may realize this, but Senator Bryan actually passed at the time the largest tax cut in the state's history back in 97, 98, somewhere in that category. But of course, several tax cuts in more recent times have kind of eclipsed that one.
They have. It was an attempt to the buzzword at the time was getting rid of the marriage penalty, as they called it. But it reduced the income tax a bit for families. It increased the zero bracket some. But it was an attempt. This was when Governor Fordyce had been elected, and it was an attempt to take into consideration some of his legislative agenda.
So my point is that Ryan, and then I'm not just trying to make him feel good while he's sitting here in the studio with us.
All right ahead. So few people do.
But he knows more about taxes.
I would like to have more people trying to make me feel good.
than the average legislator, I guess, Geoff.
One thing, Senator, I think you touched on, we have relatively low taxes, and they're getting lower over the next.
We do.
Of
the states, and there are 40 some odd states that have an income tax. Mississippi has the lowest, just about the lowest top bracket, which will be 4%, and we have just about the highest zero bracket. That is the amount of money you earn before you start paying any income tax. So the income tax Mississippi has is percentage-wise less than most states get from their income taxes. And I just want to say there is no correlation between the amount of income tax and economic activity or any economic indicator anywhere. None at all. And people say that abolishing the income tax is going to do this, that, and the other thing. It will have relatively zero impact. Go look at some actual. Well, I've never seen one, but look at an actual, real statistical study of states with regression analysis that compares all 50 states on any economic factor you want to come up with.
Well, proponents though say, well, look at states around us that don't have an income tax or near. Look at Florida. Look at Tennessee,
and Texas.
Those are quite frequently.
Those states have a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of differences.
New York seems to be doing right well. They've got the highest taxes known to man. There's been some relocation after the pandemic, and we don't know it. But before the pandemic, how that's all going to play out. But before the pandemic, New York City was the most populous city ever in the history of the United States. It's still the most populous city in the state, and they've got taxes running out their ears. The reason people move to New York City is it's a Disneyland for adults. It's the capital of the world. There are things happening there. People live where they want to live to a large extent. People are moving to Nashville and Atlanta because there are things to do in Nashville and Atlanta. There's an income tax in Georgia. It hasn't seemed to hurt Atlanta. And so just picking out state A, B, and C and saying these three states are doing well, at least we say they're doing well, I wouldn't want to be in Texas and be uninsured and need health care. I think Texas probably has one of the largest number of uninsured people in the percentage-wise in the nation.
Yeah, I think they're ahead of Mississippi in number of uninsured.
So, if maybe not having an income tax leads to having a lot of people without health insurance.
But you would admit that there's some things you could look at in terms of the state's tax structure that should be perhaps addressed. Or
Well, where we are out of line is the sales tax on food. And Mississippi is the only state in the union that taxes food at the same sales tax rate as other purchases. Other states have a sales tax on food, but it's reduced. At one time, we had passed legislation to reduce the sales tax on food by half, and Governor Barber vetoed that legislation.
And some states don't have a sales tax on food at all. A lot of states
But
don't.
let's talk about the sales tax on food and why this is an issue. First of all, the sales tax falls most heavily on people with low incomes. Percentage-wise, people with low incomes spend more of their money on items subject to a sales tax than wealthy people do. First of all, wealthy people don't spend all their money. They save some of it. Percentage-wise, they save a lot more than low-income people. So there's no sales tax on that. And then it also is the case that we cannot collect sales tax on food stamp purchases. So if you look at the working poor, which is a group of people I do not understand why we don't try to do more for, but if you're a low-income person and you do not qualify for food stamps, you're just paying 7% more on your grocery bill. Why would we want to pick out to disadvantage someone, the people who are working but earning the lowest amount of money you can earn without being eligible for food stamps?
Well, some of the folks talking about, it's come up before on cutting or eliminating the income tax. Some of what you hear is, well, we need to shift more of the burden to a sales or use tax.
Yes, that's being driven by these out-of-state ideologues who have lots of money and come in with these very well-tested little catchphrases. They've got a lot of money behind them. I know why they're doing what they're doing. It's beyond me why anybody in the state legislature would pay any attention to them, but apparently they do.
I recall you and Grover Norquist once had a pleasant chat during a committee meeting.
Well, it was very frustrating, and it was a study committee, and this says a lot. It was a study committee theoretically about the income tax. They had two economics professors from Ole Miss, which reinforces my great concern about the economics department at Ole Miss. And I asked one of them a question, and he said he wasn't here to talk about that. Well, what sort of expert witness is that won't answer a question about economics? So that was disturbing. And Mr. Norquist is famous for saying that he wants to shrink government small enough so that you can drown it in a bathtub. I asked him, just as an introductory question, if he had said that before. He talked, apparently trying to run out the clock, forever and just wouldn't admit that he made that statement. It was very frustrating. And during that, and I wasn't really offended about this, but Speaker White was a member of that committee. And I mentioned in passing that I was not in favor of reducing the income tax. And he said, well, if you're not in favor of reducing the income tax, why are you on this committee? And I was not offended by that, and I think highly of Speaker White, and I consider him a good friend. But I thought that was an insight in the way that so-called study committees work around the legislature. It didn't used to be that way. But if you'll think back in recent years, a lot of study committees, and for that matter, committee meetings and hearings exist to rubber stamp a decision that's already been made. And that's just not my idea of how a hearing works. That was a very frustrating hearing. But nevertheless, part of the reason that these out-of-state groups are driving a reduction of the income tax is they do want to deprive government of revenue. They do want to shrink government small enough so that you can drown it in a bathtub. And the government that we have in the state legislature funds highways, it funds roads, it funds a civil justice system, it funds prisons, it funds basic things I think most people expect government to do. That's the government they're trying to shrink small enough to drown in a bathtub. Another, just as a technical matter, another thing that every time they talk about these tax cuts, they talk about them in current dollar terms. And so all the figures that you will see do not take into account inflation. And of course, all of this is, you remember the disaster they had in Kansas several years ago when this crowd had their way and they cut all the taxes in Kansas, and then they got a different legislature, and they've had a Democratic governor in Kansas now for a while. All is a reaction to the overreach of this silliness that they had of doing away with a huge amount of taxes in Kansas. And the crowd that's for that is writing a book and says there's no problem with the tax cut in Kansas. The problem is they just didn't cut government back when they cut the taxes. And again, what the people behind the sales tax affirmatively want to do is to leave a government unable to provide for education, roads, prisons, health care. They don't want the government to do any of that. And it's just, it's extremely disturbing that this would even be considered, particularly when we've got so many things we need to do. By the way, I asked Grover Norquist if he would have voted for the highway program in 1987, which included a gasoline tax increase. And he just never would answer the question. And so I would just like for all of us to think, if we're going to be in Mr. Norquist's world, we would not have had the 87 highway program, and we would not have had that increase of 3 whole cents in the gasoline tax. Think of all the 4-lane highways we would not have. Think of the industry that's located here, which demands 4-lane highways. I don't know that there's anyone who thinks we'd be better off without that 4-lane highway program, particularly considering the huge increase in the cost of construction. But that's the world that Mr. Norquist lives in, and I don't think that's the world we want to live in, and the people of Kansas sure didn't want to live in that world.
Without the 4-lane highway program, 78 never would have been 4 lanes, so theoretically you wouldn't have Toyota in up in northeast Mississippi, or the battery plant, which was part on a 4-lane highway that was a result of the 87 plant, the battery plant.
It was a $600 million highway program to 4-lane roads all over the state of Mississippi.
That's a drop in the bucket now.
we had, and we need to talk about this more when we're talking about the income tax, we passed, and it was a very fine proposition, an incentive package for the new plant in Marshall County. And as a part of that, we're going to build a new interchange on the highway to get to that plant. The estimated cost of that is $60 million. So that $600 million highway program that we had that built roads all over the state would get you 10 interchanges today.
Yeah. And interestingly, that plant is right, going back to the income tax for a second, that plant that's being built is on the Tennessee line, and the study was that a lot of the folks who would work at that plant would be coming from Tennessee, but they'd be paying state income taxes, so that would help offset the cost of that interchange and the other incentives they're offering for that plant. But
right you are. I just looked this up just before I came here. And in the package, the economic study for the plant in Marshall County, where they're talking about how much money it would mean to the state, the economist clearly state, and it's there, you can go read it, that it will produce a lot of income tax. And it's about, in 2030, when they say the plant will be running at full scale, they predict the state of Mississippi will get $20 million in income tax. And there's indication how this increases. They say in 2040 it'll be up to 28 million. So you can see that it's an increasing amount of money, whatever the dollar amount is. If you reduce the millage rate, the percentage of the tax rate, you're losing that amount of money in perpetuity, indexed for inflation. But the study itself says there are going to be a lot of people from Tennessee working at this plant, but the income they earn in Mississippi will be subject to the Mississippi income tax. So we are able to tax people from other states who work in Mississippi and get money into the state of Mississippi with the state income tax. That's very important with this particular plant, and I think other plants are likely to be located in that area very close to Tennessee.
Yeah.
If we don't have an income tax, that means the calculations for the money the state was going to get to offset the incentives are off. But it also means that we're taking money out of the state economy, because if the money from Tennessee stays in Tennessee, that money is not spent in Mississippi. If it comes to the state of Mississippi in the form of income tax, and we turn right around and build roads in Mississippi with it, that's an investment in Mississippi. So basically, we're sending money to corporations, national corporations that will not be paying an income tax, and we're sending money to non-residents that won't be paying an income tax. That money goes out of Mississippi's economy. It does not get in the economy and turn over.
Speaking of roads and taxes, something you've talked about many times over the years, we have an issue. We have a flat per gallon tax, and as you mentioned a minute ago, that's not keeping up with inflation, with cost. What do we need to do there?
Well, we need to listen to what every single highway commissioner of both political parties has been telling us for more than a decade, and it's beyond me. It is beyond me where the coalition that built highways was before. We had a coalition of business people who knew the importance of four-lane highways, people interested in economic development in their communities who knew the importance of four-lane highways. We had obviously the highway contractors and the asphalt companies and concrete companies and others who were interested in road construction pulling together to get a highway plan built. And it's a mystery to me why that coalition can't be put back together. But this is where we are. For 50, 60, 70 years, we funded highways in this country by a gasoline tax, said to be a user fee. It was a worthwhile way to fund roads. It worked fairly well. People drove cars, bought gasoline, paid tax, it paid for roads. But with inflation, if you don't increase the per gallon tax, then the money you get is worth less and less and less and less, even if people were purchasing the same amount of gallons per mile. So the gasoline tax that we have now was what it was when we passed the 87 highway program. And you look at the price of gasoline in 1987 and the price of gasoline now was 35 years later. And the price of gasoline has gone up maybe 10 times, and the cents per gallon has not. Maybe not quite 10 times, but I was rounding off. You could look it up. I guess if you have one of those phones, you could look it up right now, but please don't. That's really ruins so many.
Just going from memory, it's more than doubled. Easily.
Yeah, yeah. It was way less than $1. But
but the taxes.
You also have more efficient cars, so you're getting more miles per gallon, which means more wear and tear on the roads. You now have cars that is either no gasoline or very little gasoline, and that's the future. So the amount of revenue collected from the sales tax, from the gasoline tax, is going to get smaller and smaller. And of course, over the past 35 years, there's been a bit of inflation. It costs more to build roads now than it did. And so literally every highway commissioner for 10 years has been coming to the legislature saying this. It is just a mystery to me why a group of people who I think really do care about the state aren't trying to do something about this. It's got to the point where for the longest there's basically no construction, and all the money they get their hands on is trying to maintain this asset, which I think is probably worth about $50 billion. And I know that I've been talking about this forever, but just to mention some needs that we have around the state, for the life of me, I don't understand why we don't replace Highway 49 from Jackson to the coast with a 6-lane controlled access highway going from Gulfport to north of Canton. There is no north-south road leading north from the coast where you can counterflow traffic in the event of a hurricane evacuation. And that is critical. It's getting more critical. Fortunately, we have much better ability to predict hurricanes than we've had previously. But there comes a time when you have to decide whether to evacuate or not. It's a huge, huge, unimaginable thing to try to evacuate people from the Gulf Coast. But it's a matter of life and death. The quicker your evacuation route operates, that allows you to wait longer before you have to give the order. You have few false alarms, because I'm saying, just guessing, that people will evacuate one time if it's a false alarm. If they evacuate 2 times and it's a false alarm, it's going to be very difficult to evacuate third time when the tornado is really worse than we expect. I mean, the hurricane's really worse than we expected.
Katrina proved that.
No.
There had been two run-ups, one, I believe, mandatory evacuation for some areas, and they called it hurricane fatigue. So, yeah, a lot of people.
And again, place yourself in the position of someone who's got to make a call. If you had this road I've been talking about for 25 years, you could counterflow traffic. And again, I'm off in my own world. I don't always know what I'm talking about. But I would have an emergency refueling station somewhere in Stone County, so you don't have to go fill up your gas before you leave. Get in the car, get going, pull off, get in line in Stone County, and we'll have the gasoline trucks come there instead of trying to. Anyway, Highway 55 coming south from Memphis intersects with 269 or Highway 69, which has been, the feds have built because it's an interstate highway, although we've contributed to it. But the highway narrows before you get to that intersection. There's a huge amount of traffic in DeSoto County. Clearly, that needs to be extended on down to that intersection, and that costs a lot of money, but it ain't getting cheaper, and the traffic is not getting less. We've been talking about Highway 15 and Highway 25 in northeast Mississippi forever. I was told that Highway 25 was the first road to be 4-laned after the completion of the highway program. I had just been elected when that was passed. I thought that would occur. It did not. To speak about Highway 25, which goes through Amory, there are roads outside the state of Mississippi, you know. And so there is a 4-lane highway that goes from Huntsville and Decatur, Alabama, to Interstate 22 in Itawamba County and dead ends. And it should intersect with Highway 25, and that 4-lane should continue on down through Amory and Aberdeen and down to Columbus. And that would that would give you a direct shot through all those areas, open that area up for industrial development. There is, along that route, the Mississippian Railroad, which is a short line railroad owned by Itawamba County. It basically is a 25-mile industrial spur, and you could have a 4-lane highway paralleling that. It would be an opportunity to have a place where you could shift freight from rail to truck. You could do that on the short line railroad, where you would get excellent customer service, and you would deal with a railroad that had time to deal with you. And then also Highway 15, I remember being at a meeting, one of those meetings about the future of Northeast Mississippi, and there was a discussion of highways and this income tax cut. And I think we were talking at this time about the franchise tax cut. And the late Bobby Martin from Ripley,
Banker.
owner of the Bank of Ripley, they have not seen fit to go employ someone at great expense to come up with a string of letters that sort of halfway looks like a word in the English language, but really is not a word in the English language, and start calling themselves that. They still call themselves Bank of Ripley. Anyway, Mr. Martin stood up and said that income, or that recent tax cut, saved my bank 6 figures. We don't need a tax cut. We need the 4-lane Highway 15. And that is just, for me, just captured this type of enlightened civic leadership that the state has had from time to time. I certainly think of Mr. McLean. I think of Jack Reed. I think of people like that with foresight, business leaders looking for the future. And I'll say this for the business community, they're not out advocating for this income tax cut.
As far as the roads and getting something other than the static flat tax, how do you do that? Would you be better off with an indexed sales tax tied to the cost per gallon, or divert it from?
It'd be very simple. Just get a diversion of the use, a percentage. It'd be a very small percentage, scope of things, but you'd divert a percentage of the the income tax, the sales tax, and the use tax to the highway department for roads, just like we divert for other things. And it would be a diversion. The gas tax is a diversion. This would flow to the highway department.
Instead of doing it at the pump where you would have a percent.
I just think the gasoline tax is not the future, and I would divert funds from existing revenue, certainly before I would even think about an income tax, because the highway department needs a dedicated stream of revenue. That way they can plan. They can pull down federal funds. They could even issue bonds. There was a time not that long ago, we could have issued bonds at less than the rate of inflation, put people to work building roads when there was an economic slump. It was outside work, which is a safe type of work to do, and on and on and on. And we've got to get started, and time's a-wasting.
Yeah, you even just in conversations with me, just maybe it was just a streamer's conscious on your part, but you talked about, which would sound counterintuitive unless you look at your whole plan. You've talked about reducing the gasoline tax.
Well, if you could do so, and this is the opportunity that we have, but I would do this as opposed to the income tax cut. If you could cut the gasoline tax, you would increase the difference between Mississippi and surrounding states. And if that got to be large enough, I think you would have more cross-state purchases because you would have a lower gasoline tax rate in Mississippi. And then I think that would lead to more competition, and more volume, which would drive down the costs that that's being charged at the pump. And if you reduce the gasoline tax to a very large extent, that's money that's going to remain in Mississippi. To a large extent, that's money that will stay in people's pockets, and for a lot of people, it'll get spent otherwise. And I think we would more than pick up in cross-state purchases, whatever we would lose in cross-state purchases.
And we would probably attract more Buc-ee's to Mississippi.
I've never seen a Buc-ee.
You've never been to a Buc-ee's?
I have not.
Well, Senator Bryan, just changing topics real quick before we conclude this. The session's been over for a couple of months now, but what was your thoughts on the Medicaid expansion debate, and was that a lost opportunity?
40 some odd states roughly just simply expanded Medicaid, as it's called. This would never have been an option for this bizarre decision of the United States Supreme Court. The failure to allow the United States government to come and provide money to take care of working poor people in this state is one of the biggest unfathomable policy failures of my entire career. The state treasury would make money if we simply expanded Medicaid. It has kept billions and billions of dollars out of the state of Mississippi simply because we will not allow the federal government to come in and spend this money. And of course, we talk about the economics of it. I think we always need to remember of the human suffering that's caused if you're sick and you can't get to a doctor. And if you look at something like cancer, early diagnosis of cancer is just critical to curing cancer and, for that matter, saving money in the healthcare system. Think of the people who have cancer, which is going undetected because they don't have enough money to get to a doctor. It's just heartbreaking.
Geoff, you want to leave it on that happy note?
On that happy note, sure. Senator, we appreciate you coming in today, and we've hit on several topics that we could probably have another 4 podcast sessions on. So hope you will.
You have a podcast with other guests, I'm led to believe.
We do.
Why?
Occasionally.
Why?
Good question.
I could come every week.
Okay. Well, I
have much to be concerned about. I have many issues. We haven't even talked about architecture.
Right. The Hob Bryan Show.
I wouldn't.
Brought to you by Senator Hob Bryan.
I think you should. Yeah.
I
think every week the two of you should look around the state and say, who would be the person who has the most critical information to share with our listeners? And every week, of course, it would be me, and I would come.
Right.
And it'd probably be cheaper than going to a psychiatrist for you, too. Just you could get things off your chest.
Catharsis.
Those who go around lighting these candles fail to realize the benefit that comes from just cursing the darkness.
Right. Well, Senator,
how's that for a cheery note?
That's a cheery note to end on. We do appreciate you coming in, and
it's very nice of you to
have you back soon.
Very nice of you to have me. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bryan.
As we cover the biggest political stories in the state, you don't want to miss an episode of The Other Side. We'll bring you more reporting from every corner of the state, sharing the voices of Mississippians and how they are impacted by the news. So what do we need from you, the listener? We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That address is podcast@MississippiToday.org. Y'all can also reach out to me or any of my colleagues through social media or email. And as always, thank you for your feedback and support. Subscribe to our weekly podcast on your favorite podcast app or stream episodes online at mississippitoday.org/theotherside. For the Mississippi Today team, I'm Adam Ganeshow. The Other Side is produced by Mississippi Today and engineered by Blue Sky Studios. We hope you'll join us for our next episode.